everyone. Welcome to the Rise with Rosa podcast. And today I'm actually going to be sharing more of my story. This is actually a spontaneous topic that came to me, and I realized that I actually want to share more of my personal stories because, you know, all these thoughts that I'm sharing and all these, words of wisdom, if you will, they obviously come with a story behind me. Mm-hmm. And so I can't expect for anyone to really understand where I'm coming from and where I'm coming from with this stuff. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to share my story. So Phil's sitting here with me right now.
All right, Rosa.
And Phil, despite the fact that I've known you for a while now, I don't think you really know my full story. I think
I've got
Howard,
drips and drabs.
Yeah, I think Howard shared it was a skewed version of the story. Mm-hmm. But think about how you shouldn't get in the car with me because I got in 4 car accidents.
My goodness.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah. So I'm going to redeem myself here. Okay. And I'm going to share the real story of what happened.
Compared to when Howard tells a story, he winds up with his tongue out like halfway in going, what?
Yeah. So here's what really happened. Mm-hmm. So, I don't even know where to start because this is a very spontaneous topic. Mm-hmm. But it is a common story that I tell a lot. And so that I can be better understood on where I'm coming from. And so I get to what's cool is that I actually understand and can see that if before this all happened to me, I would be the first person to judge this. I was very logical. I was more left brain. So I went through a shift in my life. Okay. I actually never chose this. I never chose to see life in this way. I was awakened to it. It's a difference. And even though as I awakened to this, it's expressing aspects of me that was always there. This is how it went down. I didn't just wake up and say love, peace, and happiness. Okay. What actually happened was this. When I was younger, I knew of my gifts. And it wasn't until I got older where I started to remember parts of me as a child. And we all have that, and not all of us remember what they were or anything like that. But I do remember there were just things that stood out when I was younger. And my parents are divorced, and my parents are just amazing parents. They did so many things wrong, like everyone does, but they did so many things right. And, just typical old school Italian upbringing, really loud and lots of food and lots of moral talks and, a lot of judgment and everything else that we go through. But there were also other things, and with respect, just to respect my own, the people in my life, I can't share too many details, but there was a lot that, I went through with my family that actually shaped the person that I am today and shaped the way I see life. And so what it did to me was that because I was an extreme, athlete, I played on a provincial and national level, and I went to school in the States on a soccer scholarship on a full ride. Mm-hmm. I played at a very high level. So even through high school, I would go to school, I would rush home. Actually, sometimes I'd go to school, I would play my after school, sports team. Then I would rush home, eat dinner, at like 4:30 p.m. that my mom already had ready. She had stuffed my soccer bag, and I'd have like 3 soccer practices, come home at 10, 11 p.m. And somewhere in between there, I was like a straight A student. So I was always it was just in my nature to achieve and go. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of helped me and hurt me at the same time. So it helped me in ways that, because of that, I developed a lot of skills. I had the ability to be disciplined and focused and be goal-oriented and achieve things. And so it was really good in many ways. But at the same time, for what I was actually going through in my own personal life, it wasn't a true reflection on what people would see on the outside. So I was being perceived as like this perfect person, or I was being perceived as, straight A student, great athlete, top achiever, mm-hmm. all these things, when really there was actually so much suffering happening within me. And that's weird. I just had like a weird emotional trigger. But it was there was a lot of suffering happening. And it wasn't a suffering of being bullied or not feeling good enough or anything like that. It was actually true suffering of something that was going on, in my family home and and things that, you don't want to happen, and things that were just happening. And there was a lot of shame around it, so I didn't really share with anyone. And in fact, I remember my best friend, when I finally shared with her, because I wrote a book about it, and I shared with her, she was shocked to know that she's known me for like 20 odd years. She's like, I can't believe I never even knew this about you. And so just to give an idea of how much I kind of hid from it. So I can understand that when people are going through things, you never really know what they're actually going through. Everyone hides what they're going through, and understandably so, because we live in this world that's so judgmental, and we base things on perceptions and stuff. So I understand. And the funny thing is that what I've been through is put me in a place where I always assume people are suffering and are in need of help. I never allow myself to perceive things to receive things the way they're being perceived. I have a curious mind and curious to how people are and all that stuff. And so basically, I got really, really, really busy. And when I went to school in the States, a few times I didn't want to come home for the summer. I chose to live in California for a couple months to play for a soccer team. And so what I was actually doing, I ran a lot. I would run for, and I say this in quotation, but I would run for fun for like 2 hours.
No way.
And so some people be like, man, you're so disciplined. I remember if I reflected on my day, because I had a list of things to do and I had structure. And if I looked in the next day, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to work out. I would seek a 24-hour gym and go to the gym at 4 a.m. to make it happen. Like, it wasn't an option not to happen.
It's not like your schedule was molded around that time. You just went there because it's there.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Totally. And so, I would count my calories. I was obsessive with my weight. And so, I was just obsessive with calories. And what was being perceived as discipline and fit and all that stuff was in fact, a form of control that I did not know I was doing. Okay. And so I can share a little bit that I feel like is necessary to share. And that I know that my family can trust that, I'm sharing for a good reason. But one thing that I grew up realizing was that, my mother is, coming from an Italian background, and I know a lot of people can relate to this, and just that kind of generation is just all about giving to others, and serving the family and the kids before yourself. And so in doing that, my mom, her whole life lived for her kids. And in doing that, she wasn't loving herself and wasn't able to take care of herself. And as a child growing up and watching this, I watched how that affected her life in many ways, in particular her marriage and how she was being treated. And, I kind of made sense of it over time, but I remember associating with, wow, if you don't take care of yourself and you don't love yourself, that's how people treat you. But how to love yourself and take care of yourself means you have to look a certain way. And so I became obsessive with working out and everything, because I lived to not be that way. I didn't live to be something. I lived to not be that way. And so my whole fight in my life was, to avoid the pain that I had experienced growing up in my childhood. I mean, that's just literally a fraction of what I've been through. But, and I didn't realize I was doing that. So that's why I recognize, as I'm sharing things with people, if they're in a phase of their life where they're still in it, the way I was in it, I wouldn't hear me. I wouldn't hear this. Because I didn't know I was doing it. So if anything, I'd feel judged or anything or whatever. So there just needs to be a point of surrender where okay, I need help. I need something for us to be able to hear what it is that I'm saying and the message that I'm portraying. And so what ended up happening was I started to move really fast in my mind. And within a 2-year period, to long story short, I got into 4 serious car accidents. 2 of which I was a pedestrian and I was hit.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And so just to show you how stubborn my ego was, and how much I was running from the truth, not knowing it. So the first one, I was coming from a place of actually, no, I pulled an all-nighter because I put together this really cool surprise party for my ex-boyfriend at the time. And I had lacked sleep, and I told him at the end of the party with his family and everything, I said, I need to go home. And, hey, Howard. Howard just entered the room. So, Howard, I'm just telling my story. So, I basically, I didn't want to stay to party after the party. So I drove, I told him I'm going to drive home. And so I drove home and I fell asleep behind the wheel and I crashed into a ditch. And I even remember when I crashed into the ditch, there was a car that pulled aside. And right away he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm dressed in this dress. I'm looking really good and everything." And I'm just kind of like, "What the hell just happened?" Right? Because I passed out. And I remember this guy pulled up and was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Where do you live?" I'm like, "Just around there," because I was coming off the exit. It was like 3 minutes away from home. And he said, "If the police sees you, they're going to charge you. Turn off your lights. Just come in the car. I'll take you home." And I'm like, yeah, okay. And like, I obviously was like cluttered, and I'm like, just let me call someone first. So I'm calling someone, and then the guy drove off. So it's just like, that was odd. But obviously I wasn't in that right place. But so that's what happened. I damaged my car. I was safe. And then within about a year of that time, I was going to celebrate New Year's with 3 of my girlfriends, and lied to my strict parents about me driving to Ottawa, and told them we were going to Oshawa or something, because we were going to meet up with some guys. And so we're driving on the highway, and I'm, basically, long story short, it's like a winter storm. I had to work, so we didn't leave till like 5 p.m. that day, and try to make it for 10 p.m. to shower, get ready, and party for New Year's, right? So so 2 hours into, I think we were in Kingston or something like that, there was a car in front of me, and, to anticipate not like crashing, you lightly press the brakes.
Right, you slow down and try to focus on that position.
Yeah, and so my friend, it was my friend's car, didn't tell me that we didn't have winter tires.
Oh dear.
Yeah. And so I lightly touched the brake and immediately felt like I had no traction. And we started to swerve, and we, spun the car and crashed into the rail all the way on the right side. And so now we're perpendicular to the highway. And I looked to the right side, and I remember my best friend being beside me, and we're both looking to the right, and we're seeing this huge transport truck driving towards us. And I remember her being like, "Rosa," and me, I just thought that was the end. And the transport truck started to kind of turn a little bit, but they can't brake because then they'll swerve. So they're taught to, like, he had to go through us. But he got the tail end of our car, the whole front windshield crashed, cracked open. And my best friend put her hand on her head. There was blood coming out. I ran outside, grabbed snow, and put it on her head, and it was like crazy, right? So that was that. And then the next one was, I was in California, again, still running away from my life. And I was rollerblading on the sidewalk, and there was a car. And here's the thing. So I was so obsessive with my workout, and I'm going to share this because I know it's very something that a lot of people can relate to. I was so obsessive with my workout and my body weight that while I was actually rollerblading to the gym because I would burn more calories that way. Okay. So I actually decided I'm going to rollerblade to the gym because I'll burn more calories.
Right.
And I never enjoyed working out. I needed music. Right? I'm not mindful during my workout. I would just jam to really good music, and then the time would pass and I got her done. Right? And I needed to train for my fitness test because every year I'd go back to play soccer in preseason. They would kill us with the fitness. And so it was something I had to do. And so as I'm rollerblading to the gym, I'm listening to my MP3 player at the time. And I'm rolling on the side. I'm rollerblading on the sidewalk, and a car coming out of a plaza. They're supposed to stop before the sidewalk.
Yes,
they didn't. They just drove through me onto the street where oncoming traffic was coming, but it was far enough that I didn't get hit by a car. And I immediately got up, and everyone's like cursing at this guy, "Are you crazy?" or whatever. And I'm coming up, and the guy comes out of the car. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I had been living in Cali for about 2 months then. So it was about a week away from me going home. And I probably had about like $40 or $30 left. Oh, no. So I remember thinking like, man, like I only have $30 left. I got to be wise. I can't go out to eat. I have to buy groceries or whatever. And I remember when the guy came out of the car, he's like, "Are you okay? Oh my gosh." I'm like, I remember looking at my MP3 player and trying to play the music, and it was broken. I looked at him. I'm like, "You broke my MP3 player." Like, I was so pissed off that that's what he did.
You're not thinking about your wounds?
No.
You're not thinking
No, like, how am I going to work out now? Yeah. Oh, I'm not going to enjoy my workout, right? I can't work out without music. And right away, he's like, I'm so sorry. Like, how much did that cost or whatever? I'm like, I don't know, like $80. And then he pulled out his wallet and he, like, gave me $80 American. Okay.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah. So he gave me $80. He's like, "I'm so sorry. It's okay, whatever." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." But I was just, like, pissed that my MP3 was broken, right? And so he he then drove off or whatever, and I'm playing around my MP3, and I was in denial. I kept playing with it and finally accept the fact that it broke, so I just threw it. I threw it on the lawn and just rollerbladed, like pouted to the gym, thinking, so pissed. So then I go into the gym and I jump on a treadmill. I run for about 3 minutes and I'm like, screw it. I stopped it. I'm like, I'm not motivated. I don't want to do this. Right? I just couldn't get myself to run, which then obviously shows that I'm not able to work out without music on. Right? I'm lacking that presence. So I'm not knowing this. So I turn around, I leave the gym, and I start rollerblading back, and I see my MP3 player. So for whatever reason, I grabbed it and I started playing around with it, and it started to work.
Really?
And my first thought was like, yes, I just made $80. Right? So that's like where my head was at. I still wasn't catching the message. Okay. So 8 months later, I'm back at school on campus, and I decided to skip class because I was painting my nails. How I justified that is I painted my nails and they weren't dry yet, so I guess I can't go to class. And it was the first day where the weather was beautiful. And so I decided I'm going to go for a run. Yeah. So I went for a run and went for 20 minutes. And again, long story short, I got home, and once I got home, I had to cross the street, and that's when I got hit by a car. And this time, it caused me to have a metal plate in my arm. I was bedridden. I was stuck on like the ground when I got hit by a car, it took the ambulance 45 minutes to come get me. So my friend had to like direct traffic to make sure I wasn't run over, and it was like pretty bad.
Oh, absolutely.
And so that's when my life changed. But when I was talking to Howard, actually, in the story, he was asking if it's like when that light turned, and it's like it was actually a progression. It was actually over the next 2 years after healing, because even then I still didn't get the point. So I had a sling in my arm, and for the first 2 months I was stressed that I was going to gain weight. How am I going to burn calories?
What
oh my
about
gosh,
my MP3 player?
Yeah, like I was just more worried about things that still didn't matter. Like I wasn't getting the point. And so when I was decent enough, I would go to the gym and jump on the elliptical with my sling on. I would try to weight train. My body's killing me. It's hurting. And even then, it's swelling. I'm not feeling good about myself, all that stuff. So I wasn't actually getting the point. And I ended up going to school. When I went to school in Central Michigan University, we had this option to either do an internship at a hospital or work in the corporate setting, more like at a physiotherapy. And I chose, I thought I was going to go into med school, and I chose to do the hospital thing, where I experienced so many things and realized this is not what I'm wanting to do. I don't support this. I feel like I need to prevent people from getting to this point. And so that's why I graduated, came home, became a personal trainer. And so again, I'm still in that like industry of weight loss and all that stuff, but I'm genuine. I always knew that I wanted to help people. It's just how I thought you would help people is that when they look good, they feel good. And so as I was, a personal trainer, now all of a sudden, I got hit by a car or whatever, I'm recovering, and I'm personal training people. And then there's this pressure that if you're a personal training people, you have to look good. And so I'm trying to work out, and my body's just not responding. It's always in pain. And so it was a 2-year battle of just constantly trying to like work around this pain, and my body just wasn't the same. And so, I know it's very common for athletes to lose themselves after sports, and, it was my identity and all that stuff. So, I just wasn't in a good place, but I was so loud and still fighting and focused on the fact that I was gaining weight.
Oh my goodness.
I missed the whole point of everything, even after I was bedridden. And so just to give you an idea of where I was at, if I was listening to these podcasts about talking about love and this and that or whatever, I probably wouldn't even listen to the podcast. I wouldn't even attract it into my life. And that's what I'm saying, is that there's an understanding that it's all in, where you're at in your life to be able to receive this information. And I understand why it wouldn't be received when a person's in it. And so over time, the crazy thing, what happened was, because everything was in pain, all I could do is lie down and stretch and lie down and breathe. I remember sometimes having a client cancel, and my days were packed with clients. So I would just stay at the gym just to use that time to stretch and relax because I was in pain from long days. But what started to happen is I started to do that. I would start to get into these states of relaxation. And I remember randomly, there was a few times where I felt emotional. Or I remember a few times where I would stretch and everything, and all of a sudden a memory would come to me of my childhood. I remember being like, that's weird. Every time I like stretch my hips, like these things are happening or whatever. Like I just remember just random things happening to me, and I acknowledged it, but I didn't think anything else of it. And so again, this is how life works. But I ended up seeing Tom Cochran from Life is a Highway.
Oh, yes.
And I saw him for 2 sessions because he's in Oakville with his mom or his wife or something, and he's also in Texas. But from a mutual friend, we connected, and he purchased 2 sessions with me. And so the first session I worked with him and everything, he felt good. And the second one, he's like, listen, I really need to improve my hips. And I said, okay, cool. So, but I said to him, I don't know what it is. I know you want me to work on your hips and you're leaving for Texas and I only have this 1 session with you. But do you mind if I work on this area? And I pointed around his chest area. I said, because I feel like that's the root of the problem. Like, that's why your hips are tight. I feel like we need to work on this area. Mm-hmm. And he said, oh, it's like, well, what is it that you see? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just saying. I'm just saying, like, I'm asking for permission. Can I work on that area?
Right.
And he said, he's like, well, I just find it interesting because I had esophageal cancer and I thought that that's like what you're seeing. And I said, no, I'm not claiming that I'm seeing anything. I don't know why I'm drawn to it, but I am. And he said, oh, it's like you're reading chakras. And I said, what's that? And I remember him attempting to explain it to me, and I remember feeling like I don't think he knows what he's talking about because he wasn't able to describe it perfectly. And I'm like, okay, cool, yeah, and just let that be. Mm-hmm. And so you can see how slowly I'm starting to attract these conversations and things are happening where, there's little signs and little things that are happening that are trying to show me something. And so that was that, and then coincidentally. Okay. Within a week of that happening, I had a friend of mine's like, oh my gosh, Rose, you have to read this book. It's called Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Myss. I'm like, okay. So I read this book. It's called Anatomy of the Spirit. And as I'm reading this book, it's talking about how we store emotions in our bodies and all this stuff. And so I wasn't looking for anything. No. It just came across, right? I wasn't trying to do anything. And it resonated because it was validating what I was already experiencing, right? So I wasn't seeking help. I wasn't seeking to be better. I wasn't seeking anything.
No, it just came to you as a result.
It just came to me as a result, mm-hmm. right? And I'll tell you why I'm stressing that. Hopefully if I remember at the end of the story, I'll tell you why that's important to understand that. So I read this book. I'm like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. This is what I'm feeling, right? And so I started to have more intention behind stretching and breathing and all this stuff. And I had it with the intention of healing myself now. So now my connection, my relationship with my body completely shifted. It wasn't about losing weight or anything like that. It was like, there's stuff that's happening within me. But what really made me want to focus on that was what I started to notice was I wasn't trying to change. But what I noticed is that there was conversations that I was attracting with people that was facilitating the awakening of what was happening, whether it was through books that people would say, oh my gosh, Rosa, this or that or whatever, or conversations with people that I wouldn't have heard what they were trying to say, but this time I was hearing it. But the main things that I noticed was that I would go out in public, whether it was a grocery store or whatever, and I noticed people staring at me. And it's not just like opinion, it was actually happening. I feel like people overly noticed me. And then another thing I would realize is that I would walk away from a situation, and it wasn't until after I walked away I would look back and be like, that's odd. I remembered something like that would have triggered me, or I would have judged it, but I didn't. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't trying to be more positive because I didn't know I wasn't positive. I wasn't trying to not be judgmental. I didn't know I was judgmental. I wasn't trying not to be angry. I didn't know I had anger mm-hmm. towards people. I wasn't trying to be not triggered. I didn't know I was triggered. It was like when you have a fan in the room, it just turns off and then you notice it's off, but you didn't know it was on.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to notice parts of me after the fact, after I changed, which means I wasn't trying to change. All I was doing was breathing, meditating, and focusing on working on my body. And I was witnessing, the change manifest before my eyes, kind of thing. And then as I started to understand and accept what was happening, the intention just grew. I had an even stronger intention of doing it. And then it was around the same time, what was paralleling, it was around the same time I was personal training my clients, and I would see them 3 times a week, more times than I would see, my own friends. So you get to know them on a personal level. And despite the fact that they would lose weight and look good and everything like that, they may have maybe gained it back or they would plateau. But despite the physical changes that were temporary or not, fully maximized, if you will, one thing I noticed was that they weren't changing as people. There was something underlying that just still wasn't happy. So here they are, they're coming to lose weight. That's not because they want to better themselves, I'm thinking, so they can be happy. But if anything, it's not that they weren't happy. If anything, I noticed that their anxiety was worse, their depression was worse, their sleep was worse, their anger. I noticed that their well-being was worse, even though they were physically getting stronger. So I made a note of this. And because of that, there was a lack of fulfillment in what I was doing. Because it's like, what's the point? Right? I feel like I'm going through the motions in here. And, but when I started to notice what was happening with me, with the body and myself awakening to a happier version of me, because I was always happy. Anybody who knows me knows that I was a relatively happy person, just struggling on the inside and just had, issues with vulnerability. I actually started to recognize, oh my gosh, so then if me opening and stretching the body and all that stuff is going to open me up to this and make me feel good, does tightening and closing down the body do the opposite? So if opening it allows me to expand and feel and express and be more love, does the opposite bring us to more fear? And I only made this connection as I was watching things with my clients and behavior. So there's a lot of internal things going on in my head where it's like, interesting. Just a curiosity. I wasn't overthinking it, but I wasn't judging it either. And so I remember starting to be more intentional then, not just with my practice, but more intentional with my training with my clients. And I started to ask them, hey, where do you feel this? And I realized that an exercise I would be doing that was intended for one area of the body, they were actually feeling it in a wrong area. And I noticed that when I asked them to do things with their body, there was a lack of body awareness and they just weren't feeling. And the important thing to understand is that when I started to open up my body and started to really expand and these emotions would come and everything, I actually started to feel muscles I haven't felt my whole athletic career. I was numb to my body more than I thought. Just like I was listening to the music or whatever.
It's almost a distraction to yourself.
Yeah, totally. But I actually wasn't really feeling anything. And so I started to go into my clients' minds and ask them like, hey, what do you feel this? And I noticed that they weren't even there. They were physically there, but they were somewhere lost in a story of something.
They were busy trying to judge themselves or trying to figure out whether this number is acceptable, that sort of thing.
Yeah, totally. Or maybe just still thinking about the argument they had in the morning or this, and I was just that moment to vent. I don't know. But regardless, they weren't present and they weren't feeling things. And so long story short, as I started to bring their attention towards it and started to change my approach to actually feel and all that stuff, they started to leave their sessions happy. And I remember, the joke is always like they're walking away feeling stoned because there was like an endorphin release, right? And like, whoa. And so all of a sudden I started to get really busy with referrals of people who were suffering from like depression and grief and eating disorders, all these things. And they would come to me saying, I heard that you can help me. And I'm like, okay, well, in what, like, well, I don't know, but I heard that you can help me. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm a stretch therapist and a personal trainer. And, I'm really big on mindfulness and how to do that. And, so I always made it a point to say I'm not treating anything, but, I delivered the same thing to anyone. It didn't matter what they were doing. And so if it helps, great. But it did get to the point where it evolved and got really busy and I had a wait list and I was literally like forced to have to start my own business. So again, it wasn't a choice that I made. It just kind of happened. And then in the Rise Mind Body, when I first had it, it was a greater space for a gym with a smaller meditation room. Because I thought, what we need is both. We need to meditate, relax, yin and yang. And then I got really busy, like 90 to 95% of my clientele base was all coming for the meditation, the stretching, the opening, the healing. Wow. But I was still uncomfortable with expressing what I did. So people come see me, I was like in disguise, you know what I mean? I was just like, yeah, I'm a stretch therapist and you'll feel good, right? And so it was kind of like secret because, I hadn't accepted yet fully what was happening and all that stuff. And until eventually, I open up the next location and now it's like fully out there. Like ultimately, it's just about love and all that stuff. So that's just kind of really, believe it or not, a short version of my story. But what I noticed is that like my commitment and my devotion to a mind-body practice every day is coming from a deeper understanding of what it's really doing. And I've completely detached myself from the whole calorie weight loss thing and all that stuff. And what's crazy is that I was never able to do handstands. I have a metal plate in my arm. I have neurological damage. I was told of what I wouldn't be able to do that I've surpassed completely. And so I've been able to do things that I've never been able to do as an athlete. and I've been able to reach strengths, that I never would have imagined. And so now it's really about, finding alignment and connecting with deeper parts of myself physically, with a knowing that it's doing something to me on a whole other level. Mm-hmm. And so, and telling a person all of this and telling them the information that I'm accessing within myself, within my own practice, is not going to get someone to hear what I'm saying.
No, it's about taking in the information about you being you and then, absorbing that wisdom.
Totally. Mm-hmm. And yeah, absolutely. And it's about, here's the practice, commit to it, trust, and just know that you will come to understand this from that place of wisdom. But and this is why when we read books, we absorb maybe 30% of it. But if you're engaging in a practice of self-awareness and meditation and stretching and all that stuff, it does something where you're releasing things not even knowing. So you're more of an awakened version of yourself. You're more present, that when you all of a sudden read things that you need to hear in the messages, it just becomes more clear. They resonate more, and all of a sudden it's like, why did I hear it now, kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And so and this is why when we injure ourselves or anything like that, usually things happen after an injury, when we start to address our physical body. So anyways, that's my story. There is so much more to it, believe it or not, but I could go on and on about this, and I tell it all the time. So I'm always shortening it more. Mm-hmm. And so that's the true story. I wasn't hit by 2 cars. I was in 4 car accidents. I was only hit by 2. So.
I'm looking forward to part 2, by the way, because there has to be more to this story.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Just know that, what I would say that is so important to understand, and what I realized, oh man, I can just go forever. I had a client, I love it when my clients ask questions, because I don't know if how I'm delivering the message is not being received properly. So when they ask questions, it can help me give the same message in however, I can say it in 20 different ways if I have to. I'm still going to give you the same message, but the more they ask questions, the more I can understand their language, so that I can speak it in their language. Mm-hmm. But I had a client ask me a great question, and this goes around, it surrounds the same topic as, now we're living in a generation where we're all trying to be positive. We're all trying to be this. We're all trying to fix. And it's not going to happen if we're trying, right? We can't look for it. We need to actually accept it. I was in a place of acceptance. I wasn't trying to change anything. The only thing we need to do is find a time in the day where we can commit to a practice, where we commit to the relationship within ourselves. I talked about in the podcast where, protecting your home, and just really mastering that relationship, the marriage between your mind and your heart, and have a knowing that it's doing something, that it's shedding parts of you that you may not know yet. And then go on with life like a child, enjoy your life, be who you are.
Don't worry about the MP3 player.
Yes, do whatever. Yes, exactly. Don't try to be anything. Just go along with life, enjoying your life as it is. And when something comes to you, you will notice yourself seeing it differently, and you'll notice yourself reacting differently, and you will just notice yourself evolve naturally. You'll become the witness of what's happening. The only thing that we need to take charge in is the practice, the putting into work. When we read it in books and all that stuff, but we're not actually meditating or anything, it just becomes knowledge. And I'll tell you why this could be more hurtful for us. When we become so educated on certain things, but we're not able to live up to that knowledge, now it becomes another reason of why we're not good enough or why we're not there. And so rather than just allowing ourselves to experience, just do the meditation, stretch, and do all that stuff and connect with yourself, go on with your day. And as things happen, allow your knowledge to actually be a source, make it so that what you know is what you felt and what you experienced. So when you feel and experience something, you'll know it. So now they're in harmony. Now they're at the same level. But if you know something, it doesn't mean that you've experienced it. And so now if you know more than what you've experienced, that imbalance in itself creates a disharmony, right? So always go based off feel. Let your heart guide. Our minds and our heads are always getting ahead. And that's the problem. It's not that we need to know more. We actually need to know less, do less, and just kind of be more. So yeah. Anyways, I'm just going to abruptly end that one.
That was a lovely story.
Thank you. Thank you. And I will tell it 10,000 more times. So anyways, if you want to share your story, or if you have a similar story, if you just have any questions or you just want to say hi to me or Phil, you can email me at rosa@risemindbody.com or check me out on my Instagram on at Rise with Rosa. You can check me out on my website, www.risemindbody.com, or Instagram on at risemindbody. And until then, just choose to rise. And till next time.